Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 9 of Pigskin Glory Football 50 Years Ago Today. On tonight's episode, we are going to discuss from December 21st to December 31st, 1975, so Christmas and New Year's Eve. College is in the bowls, and the NFL is wrapping up the regular season. And just a word to the wise, just in case something breaks out. We are recording this during the Bears and Packers playoff game. None of us are Bears or Packers fans, although Chris does live in the cheese state. But the game is on, so if something happens and we're not paying attention or we, react, that is why. Going right to left, or going around the clock, let me introduce my panel today. We're a three-man panel tonight. To my right is Chris Krager from Wisconsin.
Hello?
And on the bottom, wearing the Boston Red Sox hoodie, Charles from San Francisco area.
Good afternoon or good evening.
All right, so let's get right into this, and I'm going to start by sharing the screen so that you guys can see what we're discussing. All right.
I can see it.
Now we begin on December 21st, 1976, and that, of course,
75.
what day of the week was this? Do we remember?
It was a December 21st is a Sunday because the last thing we did was the 3 Saturday games.
Copy that, right. The Pro Bowl squads have been announced, and I got to scroll up a little bit. For the NFC squad, wide receivers Mel Gray from St. Louis, John Gilliam from Minnesota, Harold Jackson from Los Angeles, and Charlie Taylor from the Redskins. Tight ends Charles Young from Philadelphia, Charlie Sanders from Detroit, tackles Ron Yeri out of Minnesota, Dan Deerdorf from St. Louis, Rayfield Wright from Dallas, guards Ed White, Minnesota, Conrad Dobler from St. Louis, Tom Mack from the Rams, centers Tom Banks from the St. Louis Cardinals, Jeff Van Note from Atlanta, quarterbacks Fran Tarkenton out of Minnesota, and Jim Hart from St. Louis. Running backs Chuck Foreman out of Minnesota, Terry Metcalf from St. Louis, Lawrence McCutcheon from the Rams, and Jim Otis from St. Louis. Chris, what do you think of that offensive NFC team?
It's a very good offense, and I should also mention that back then only 2 quarterbacks made it. That's why you don't see Roger Staubach. Had there been 3 quarterbacks like in the 80s, Staubach would have probably made it.
On the defense, you've got ends Jack Youngblood from the Rams, Cedric Hardman from San Francisco. Fred Dreyer is going to be hunting the AFC quarterbacks from Los Angeles. At tackles, Alan Page from Minnesota, Merlin Olsen from Los Angeles, and Wally Chambers from the Bears. Outside linebackers, Chris Hanberger from Washington, Isaiah Robertson from Los Angeles, and driving in is Fred Carr from Green Bay. Middle linebackers, Jeff Seaman from Minnesota, and Hacksaw Jack Reynolds from Los Angeles. Cornerbacks, Roger Worley from St. Louis, Lem Barney from Detroit, Bobby Bryan from Minnesota, safeties Cliff Harris of Dallas, Ken Houston from Washington, and Paul Krause from Minnesota. Your punter is John James from Atlanta, kicker is Jim Bakken from St. Louis, and return man Steve Odom from Green Bay. Charles, are there any glaring omissions from this NFC Pro Bowl team?
Not as far as I'm concerned. Although Chris said that you may notice some omissions there because your football expertise is miles ahead of mine.
Only one Cowboy on defense. You know, a lot of guys who will make the Pro Bowl in future years are just babies at this time, like Randy
Charles,
White and Too Tall Jones.
Charles, in baseball, every team has to be represented, but not so much in football. You can have years where certain teams don't get represented. However, I do see Atlanta got a kicker as well as an offensive lineman in Jeff Van Note, but perhaps maybe the Rams kicker or the Cowboys might have made it. What do you think about baseball compared to football when it comes to the ruling on every team must be represented? Charles.
That's a pretty interesting answer. Also, and I think every team should be represented in both these sports as well.
We move on to the AFC with the offense, wide receivers Lynn Swann from Pittsburgh, Isaac Curtis from Cincinnati, Cliff Branch from Oakland, and Ken Burrow from Houston. Note no John Stallworth. Tight ends Riley Odoms out of Denver, Rich Castor from the New York Jets, tackles Art Shell from Oakland, George Kuntz from Baltimore, Russ Washington out of San Diego, guards Bob Kuechenberg from Miami, Gene Upshaw from Oakland, Joe DeLamielleure from Buffalo, centers Jim Langer from Miami, and Jack Rudney from Kansas City. Quarterbacks Terry Bradshaw from Pittsburgh, Ken Anderson from Cincinnati. Running backs O.J. Simpson out of Buffalo, Franco Harris from Pittsburgh, Lydell Mitchell, Baltimore, and John Riggins from the New York Jets. Once again, Chris, only 2 quarterbacks made it. Who would be the third quarterback in your opinion?
Joe Ferguson, the guy who literally tied for the lead in touchdown passes and would actually be no quarterback in the 70s will throw for more touchdown passes in a single season than Joe Ferguson and Frank Tarkenton this year.
On defense,
It's the only time I can recall. It's the only time I can recall that the league leader in touchdown passes doesn't even make the Pro Bowl.
On defense, you got ends John Dutton out of Baltimore, L.C. Greenwood from Pittsburgh, and Elvin Bethea from Houston. Tackles Jerry Shirk from Cleveland, Joe Green from Pittsburgh, Curly Culp from Houston. Outside linebackers Jack Ham from Pittsburgh, Andy Russell from Pittsburgh, and Phil Villapiano from Oakland. Middle linebackers Willie Lanier from Kansas City, Jack Lambert from Pittsburgh. Cornerbacks Mel Blunt from Pittsburgh, Lamar Parrish from Cincinnati, Emmett Thomas from Kansas City. Safeties Mike Wagner from Pittsburgh, Jake Scott from Miami, and Jack Tatum out of Oakland. Specialist punter Ray Guy from Oakland, Jan Stenerud from Kansas City, and return man Billy White Shoes Johnson out of Houston. Now, Charles, several Pittsburgh Steelers made the Pro Bowl. Is it deserving for the Steel Curtain defense to have so many of its members on the Pro Bowl?
Their job and their all-star caliber, then yes. After all, this best defenses as you'll ever see. What's interesting thing about Jack Tam of Oakland, if only Jack Tam would have been able to make that stop 3 years prior in Pittsburgh with Franco Harris caught the immaculate reception.
Well, we move on to the games now. Again, this is week 14, the final week of the regular season, and the Chargers have taken on the Bengals. Cincinnati mauls San Diego 47-17. With Miami's win on Saturday, the Bengals' situation was simple: win against a Chargers team that has won 2 straight, or lose the wild card to Miami. It was no contest. 27-0 after the first quarter, 41-10 at halftime. Ken Anderson threw for 3 touchdowns. Cincy ran for 4. And the Bengals sacked Jesse Fritas 5 times. At 11-3, they might be the best wildcard team in recent memory. They will be hard-pressed to break up the recent Raiders-Steeler playoff monopoly, but if any team is capable of winning 2 road playoff games, it might just be this one. Chris, the Bengals, could they become the first wildcard team? Now, I note that Kansas City went in 69 without winning their division, but they weren't called a wildcard. So under the name wildcard, could the Bengals be the first to go to the Super Bowl?
They have a chance to, because they're going to play Oakland, and they did beat Oakland earlier this year. But the problem is, unless they get a Colts upset, they would have to win at Pittsburgh, and they've had trouble against them. Remember, if you take out that Cleveland hiccup, that team beat them twice this year.
Eagles versus Redskins. Philadelphia whops Washington 26-3. Hold on real quick before let me make sure. Okay, we got Cardinals, we got Bears, 2 Bears, Patriots, 2 Patriots. I wanted to check the touchdowns before we moved on. All right, Eagles versus Redskins. Philadelphia wallops Washington 26-3. The Redskins, after losing what was essentially a playoff game before the playoffs, had nothing to play for and basically mailed in their RFK finale. A pair of Washington quarterbacks combined to throw 7 interceptions, with 2 of them returned for touchdowns. The only bright spot for the Skins amidst a miserable final 7 quarters, where they were outscored 57-3, was Charlie Taylor passing Don Maynard to set an NFL record for most career receptions. But they missed the playoffs for the first time under George Allen. The Redskins season basically was defined by breaks not going their way, failing to score on 4th down at Houston, overtime versus Oakland, and the controversial touchdown that wasn't, when then was at St. Louis. Charles, the Redskins have been known as the over-the-hill gang throughout the 70s. Are they too far over the hill now?
It's not yet. And that become a breakdown. As a proper call were made, the Redskins are in the playoffs off again.
Granted, that and the beneficiary of that call is up next is the Cardinals versus the Lions. St. Louis douses Detroit 24-13. The Cardinals had nothing to play for after clinching a division last week, and LA, Minnesota wrapping up the top 2 seeds on Saturday. But they didn't mail it in at the Silverdome thanks to 272 yards rushing and a blocked field goal return to go into their playoff game at Los Angeles on a high note. For Detroit, they were fighting an uphill battle with injuries. to Greg Landry, Bill Munson, but the Lions' season never recovered after a missed extra point at Kansas City, where instead of a 1-point win to get to 7-3, they lost in overtime, and basically their season was cooked big picture, despite a rare home win over Minnesota. Chris, the Cardinals, they go on a victory. How dangerous are they in the playoffs?
I think they're very dangerous because they have a little more experience. And unlike last year, they're going to be playing in the warm of Los Angeles, and the Rams have some quarterback uncertainty. And, unlike last year with Minnesota, the Cardinals, you could argue, have the three best players on the field.
As we're looking at this touchdown, the Cardinals can read Latin. The Cardinals got some players who didn't play much, some game time. In the third quarter, Jerry Latin took off on a 57-yard run on his way to a 112-yard rushing game. They went on to defeat Detroit 24-13.
And they've already got Otis. They've already got Otis and Metcalf. Damn, now they have a third running back. They got Otis and Metcalf. If he does something in the playoffs, that could be really dangerous if they get something from him.
What were you saying, Charles?
He touchdown Unum. I'm trying some Latin here with Jerry Latin.
Good deal. Well, here we go. The Cowboys and the Jets. Dallas runs past Gang Green 31-21. With last week's results, the Cowboys punching a playoff ticket and St. Louis wrapping up the East, this game meant nothing for Dallas, and Roger Staubach got a day off. Thus, Clint Longley, 1974 Thanksgiving hero, got his first career start. He was 6 for 15 for 94 yards, but didn't have to carry the team all of last year versus Washington. The Cowboys' much maligned rushing game once again came up big with 243 yards. Wildcard teams are 2-10 in playoff games since the AFL-NFL merger, but Dallas has one of those wins. They have a tough assignment at Minnesota, but this team has a few players left over from when they went and won at Bloomington on Christmas Day in 1971. Will it be deja vu all over again, Charles? Charles, what do you think? Will it be deja vu for the Cowboys?
Minnesota?
Yeah.
In the playoffs with 18, anything is possible. Any team is capable of going all the way. Take for example, 50 years into the future, the 89 Panthers nearly pull off the upset win against the LA Rams earlier today, or 50 years into the future, according to how you look at it.
Yep. Definitely better than Tampa would have.
Falcons versus Packers. Green Bay beats Atlanta 22-13. This was the definition of a meaningless game. 4-9 versus 3-10. It played out that way as both teams combined for 9 turnovers and Green Bay ran for 2 touchdowns. But the story of the game was running back Dave Hampton, who finally hit 1,000 yards after two near misses to give Atlanta their first ever 1,000-yard runner, and even got cheered by the Packer fans. No longer will we have to hear about how he gained and lost 1,000 yards in 1972. Finally, he has gone where no Falcon has gone before. Chris, gaining 1,000 yards is the bench stone, even though we've had a running back go for 2,000 in 1973. For Atlanta to get it on their first 1,000-yard rusher, how does that set them up for the future, getting that off their back?
I think it helps a lot because, Barkowski's starting to look good down the stretch. They were good. They were competitive against elite teams, and they finally got this off the back. And, given the quarterback uncertainty in Los Angeles and San Francisco and the Saints being the Saints, Atlanta could be a team to watch next year.
Remember, Atlanta does have a Pro Bowl offensive lineman, too, in Jeff Van Note. Browns versus Oilers. Houston beats Cleveland 21-10. The Browns acquitted themselves better than the 40-10 drubbing they took at home versus these Oilers, but were stuck on 10 points once again while Dan Pastorini ran and threw for a touchdown. Cleveland at times hung tough amidst a gauntlet, and one has to think their schedule will be less difficult next year. For Houston, the team mantra has changed from Bill Peterson's "we're not going to take this standing down" to Bum Phillips' "hold on to the rope." Safe to say, things have changed from 1-13 to 10-4 in just 2 years. If the NFL had 2 wild cards instead of 1, they'd be very dangerous. Charles, how would that look if the NFL had 2 wild cards and the Oilers and Bengals played each other for the right to move on?
There would have been some pretty good drama in the AFC, and who knows what could happen.
By the way,
it will be it will be 15 years before the NFL does that.
By the way, your NFC wild card game under this year,
It'll be 3 years before a second wild card will be added.
15 years would be the third wild card. By the way, Houston Cincinnati, your NFC wild card game would have been Cowboys Redskins 3.
That would be a great matchup in the 70s. We'll get it a couple times in the 80s, or at least once. We did have it in the 72 NFC Championship, but it would always be good to have. All right, Bears versus Saints. Chicago routs New Orleans 42-17. All year long, the Saints have invented ways to lose games. Today, they gave up over 40 points to one of football's worst offenses and threw a pick six. Throw in Walter Payton's 134 yards rushing, and one has to wonder if maybe the Saints would have been better off staying outside at Tulane Stadium. Charles, the Bears and the Saints, not a lot that can be said about this game, but we do have some fantastic touchdowns to look at as far as the highlight reel goes. What are your thoughts on?
As far as Walter Payton goes, well, remember that name.
So this one, the Bears always order livers in interceptions. New Orleans quarterback Larry Sippa threw 3 interceptions against the Bears, and this one by Virgil Livers was taken back 40 yards for the score and a 28-10 lead for the Monsters of the Midway.
You can tell it's not Archie Manning because he wasn't being sacked.
And I guess the only good thing about the Saints season is it's over.
They didn't go winless.
Sweetness is born on this run. This is one of the more memorable runs of Walter Payton's rookie years. Chicago Bears rookie Walter Payton displayed his elusiveness and speed on this 54-yard run against the Saints, perhaps the most fantastical run of 1975 for Sweetness.
And this would pretty much springboard him because the next year he would finish third in rushing, and then he won the rushing title in 77. So pretty much starting then in 76 is going to become Walter Payton, the legend we all remember.
It's going to be something to look forward to following as we go through the 1976 season next year. And remind me, at the end of this, we're going to be looking. I'm going to be going over how January and the rest of the offseason are going to be handled, because obviously we have less games to talk about. But let's continue on this final week of the regular season in the NFL. And we got the Patriots versus the Colts. Baltimore corrals New England 34-21. Everything was at stake for the Colts. Win to take a division title, or lose and Miami's reign continues. When the Patriots returned the opening kickoff for a touchdown and later forged a 21-20 fourth quarter lead, Baltimore fans were having flashbacks to 1971 when they blew the AFC East in a similar situation as heavy favorites at home versus New England. But not today. Lydell Mitchell ran for the go-ahead touchdown, and Colts forced 5 turnovers, one of them a game-sealing pick six, fittingly against the team who handed them their first loss in Week 5. Miami missing the playoffs for the first time under Don Shula, while Baltimore went from 2-12 last year and 1-4 this year to AFC East champions. The only question left to ask is which of these headlines was more improbable. Chris, what do you think about the Colts?
Baltimore's turnaround.
It's got to be Baltimore, because if someone had told you Miami was going to miss the playoffs, a lot of people would have figured, well, Buffalo's going to overtake them. I don't think anybody had the 2-12 Colts being the ones that overtook them, especially after the 4-0 Bills start.
Patriots
Right.
trying to play spoiler from Jump Street. Going into the game, the Baltimore Colts had a chance to win the AFC East, but the Patriots wanted to play spoiler, and right from the opening kickoff, that was their intent when Alan Carter took that kick and brought it back 99 yards for the touchdown. And there's something I got to comment, and some of it is due to the quality of video from that era, but the other part is the vast improvement on ground conditions. As you look, the Colts and Patriots are playing on brown grass in December of 1975. And if you look at your television right now, the Bears and Packers are playing on green grass, because that's how much improvement field conditions have become.
And if you thought this field,
If it's grass, it may not be far-fetched if it was a state that was affected by deep water droughts.
and by the way, if you think this field on this day was bad, you should see the 1970 AFC title game. It was practically played in dust.
Wow.
Patriots attempt at spoiler gets spoiled. The Patriots were trailing by 6 and still wanted to play spoiler, but Steve Grogan's pass was behind the receiver and Nelson Munsey picked it off, taking it back 30 yards for the score and an AFC East crown.
Total war, Miss Agnes.
There will be better days ahead for Steve Grogan, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. He is a rookie.
Okay, moving on up. Chiefs versus Raiders. Oakland chops Kansas City 28-20. This game meant nothing in regards to playoff implications, but the Raiders had not forgotten October's 42-23 debacle at Arrowhead. They got that bad taste out of their mouth as they ran for 246 yards, and Pete Banaszak scored 3 touchdowns to continue his super job filling in for the injured Marv Hubbard. History was made on this day as 48-year-old George Blanda, with his 4 extra points, became the first player in NFL history to score 2,000 points. When it did generate the same headlines as O.J. Simpson's 2K last year, 2,000 points is remarkable considering Blanda started his NFL career in the AAFC was still around. That would be O.J.'s 2,000 yards was 2 years ago. But Charles, George Blanda's had an amazingly long career. Where do you put the 2,000 points scored as far as ultimate accomplishments in NFL history?
Right there with the 3,000 hits in baseball. At the time, I think only 14 players had reached that feat.
And don't forget, Charles, think about how short the shelf life is of kickers if they have a bad year.
And not to mention injury risk in football way more so than baseball.
Giants edge San Francisco 26-23. This was an even game statistically in terms of passing yards, rushing yards, sacks, and turnovers. The difference was the 49ers kicker Steve McMayer missed 3 field goals and an extra point, basically leaving 10 points on the scoreboard in a 3-point game. Both teams finished 5-9 with questions to be answered for New York. How will they fare next year at the Meadowlands after 2.5 years being nomads? For San Francisco, with Steve Spurrier likely gone in the expansion draft and Norb Snead not getting any younger, who will be their next quarterback? Will this matchup ever be a meaningful NFC game? Charles, we're going to let you comment since the 49ers are your team.
Plunkett, paging Jim Plunkett.
Spurrier's done.
And give about maybe 4 or 5 years, and the Niners Giants will have a lot more meaning in January.
Crazy to think that this will be the last time, because Spurrier was in the 49er organization for 9 years, and he's pretty much gone to an expansion team.
All right, now we move on to Monday, December 22nd, and what we have here is just a look at from I'm thinking this might be a Miami newspaper. Dolphins better off missing the playoffs, says Robert Marcus. I don't agree that any team is better off missing the playoffs. I mean, you get a better draft pick, sure, but Chris, what do you think of that, of a fan trying to find a positive in a season where you miss the playoffs and saying they're better?
I don't buy into the idea, because as Charles mentioned earlier with Washington, if Bubba Smith doesn't block 2 extra points, they're in the playoffs at 11-3. And again, I know they would have had to play Pittsburgh, but they did beat them a couple years ago, and they do have Don Shula. The 75 Dolphins were merely unlucky this year because they were injured all to hell, but yet they basically came within, if that Houston game goes differently, or if they score 1 more point in that Colts game, they're in the playoffs again.
And not only injured, son, but several of the Miami players lost to the World Football League, which was defunct in the middle of the season.
Here's a little cartoon. Trim's Arena. Other players looking back at the giant in the middle, saying, "I wish he'd stop saying fee, fi, fo, fum." And Don Shula says, "We did all we could." And Namath, here's an interesting one. Chris says, Joe Namath says he will play again in 76.
Well, at this point, why not? I mean, there's no, clear-cut quarterback. This isn't like the draft a couple years ago, and the running backs are all the rage this year, and the Jets have John Riggins. It's not like they need another running back. Although I think if they're going to draft a name it their parent, they're more likely to do it not in 76, but in 77.
Let me say this real quick, that as long as Joe Namath continues to play, the Jets are not a concern in the AFC East. He will continue to hold them back, as he is perhaps especially with his legs being the way they are, just a handicap at quarterback for the Jets. Moving on, we have a new head coach in New Orleans. The Saints have hired Hank Stram to be their head coach. Vice President Harry Holmes said, "We haven't selected the coach yet. We're still looking, but the report out is that Stram is their man." Charles, is this the guy who won 3 AFL championships and 1 Super Bowl with the Chiefs organization? Is this the guy that can turn around the Saints?
If Hank Stram ultimately selected, that's very possible. But this is just irresponsible journalism right here to prematurely report that Hank Stram was hired when the Saints have not selected anybody officially yet.
That's the Saints for you.
Here's some interesting names of other guys they've looked at, according to Holmes. Ara Parsegian has turned it down. Montreal's head coach Marv Levy reportedly is the other one that the Saints have looked at. But Hank Stram appears to be the guy, according to all reports.
New Orleans going to be matriculating the ball down the field, boys.
Chuck Foreman is going to have his injured eye examined. That could be a big, interesting development for the Vikings against the Cowboys if Foreman can't go.
And like well, you gotta have good hand-eye coordination.
Vinny, I unfortunately forgot to mention this in the Vikings Bills recap last week. Chuck Foreman was hit by a snowball in that game in Buffalo.
Yeah, and whoever the fan was that threw that should be ejected from Rich Stadium permanently. Liberty Bowl will pair USC and Texas A&M in Memphis, as it is bowl season, although the talk so far has been about the NFL. We have some transactions to report. Nevada Reno has named Chris Alt their new head football coach, as he was an assistant at UNLV last year. And Denver quarterback Charlie Johnson has officially announced his retirement after 15 years in the league. The last 4 with Denver, he played with Houston and St. Louis before that, and he has been hired as a scout for the Broncos. So congratulations to Charlie Johnson on a nice lengthy career. No playoff appearances, though, as a starting quarterback.
The closest he came was 1973 when he led Denver to within an eyelash of the AFC West.
And we now talking about the Liberty Bowl. Charles and Chris, it's time to get into college football as NFL regular season is wrapped up. The Liberty Bowl in Memphis, the Trojans conquer the Aggies 20-0. This was a battle of teams with zero momentum. USC went in this game on a 4-game losing streak, while A&M lost everything they had to gain with their debacle at Arkansas. But the Trojans had something to play for. John McKay was coaching his final game in college after 16 seasons and 4 national championships. The Aggies surprisingly outrushed the Trojans, but turned the ball over 4 times, including twice in USC territory. On a day where Ricky Bell ended his college career with only 82 yards rushing, he caught a 76-yard touchdown pass as the run-first program of Student Body Right outpassed A&M 174-99. The Aggie season was essentially 10 games of glory and an 8 nightmarish final quarter. For USC, it was a high note and the end of an era, as McKay had to favor their offense execution in a way wonders if he'll ever be able to in the pros. Charles, John McKay leaves USC. We've heard John Robinson is going to be taking over. What are your thoughts on the end of the John McKay era in Southern California?
It's going to be a pretty tough one to swallow if you're a Trojan. And John McKay made the announcement after the season ended, not 3-4 weeks prior to that.
And you know what happened, Charles? They went.
And second of all, we don't John McKay will fail in the pro, because going from college to pro is apples to oranges. Especially if another coach, Lou Holtz, out of North Carolina State, I understand that he could be trying to make a transition into the pros.
Wow.
So the Falcons are still as far from the playoffs as skiing is from Stone Mountain, but Falcons owner Rankin Smith Jr., son of the Falcons owner, tried to build a snowman outside of the team hotel in Green Bay. Just a little update on that for you, as not everything in Atlanta is depressing because of the missing the playoffs. Down south, winning is divine as USC's Vince Evans avoids a tackler. USC's defense flexes its muscles, shutting out Texas A&M. And let's see what else we got. Owens provided the leadership for West Virginia. Artie Owens. There's just some college news and notes. And Georgia Tech and Auburn both signed prospects. Let's see if we can get that. Let's see. Georgia Tech Monday afternoon announced the signing of two more high school players, bringing the total to 19. Vern Sampler, running back from Myrtle Beach, and Ken Taylor, 185-pound linebacker, and it's a little blurry, hard to see. Auburn signed a pair of linebackers from Miami, Florida, Jeff Sawyers and Mike Washington. And North Carolina State signed Lakeshore High School quarterback Scott Smith. So congrats to those players. 50 years.
But in the Reno paper, in the Reno race book, the Steelers are 11-point favorites against Baltimore. The Rams are favored by 7 in their game against St. Louis.
Surprised the Rams spread is that high, considering they are only separated by 1 game.
Moving on to Tuesday, December 23rd. Fran Tarkenton broke 4 of Johnny Unitas' all-time National Football League records during the 75 season and tied a 5th, while the ageless George Blanda extended the many records he already owns. And in a year when the offensive stars of the NFL virtually rewrote the standards of running backs, Terry Metcalf of St. Louis, O.J. Simpson of Buffalo, and Chuck Foreman of Minnesota joined the elite. Also earning a spot among the sports greats was Washington's Charlie Taylor, whose 635 career receptions are 2 more than the record which had been held by Don Maynard. The year belonged more to Tarkenton than any other. In his 15th season, Vikings quarterback now owns a record for career passing attempts at 5,225, passing completions at 2,931, touchdown passes 291, and most seasons with 2,000 or more yards passing 14. All these records have been held by Unitas. In addition, Tarkenton led Unitas' record of 15 seasons with 1,000 or more yards passing, and he moved within 1,400 yards of breaking Unitas' all-time yardage record. O.J. Simpson, 23 touchdowns, broke the record of 22, which was held by Gale Sayers, and his feat of scoring a touchdown in all 14 games tied a record set by Baltimore's Lenny Moore in 1964. Spats. Foreman, who had 22 touchdowns, set an all-time record for pass receptions by running back with 73. And Terry Metcalf had 2,462 all-purpose yards on runs, receptions, and kick returns, breaking by 20 the all-purpose record set last year by Mac Herron. Blanda, at the age of 48, only added to his records. They included most years played at 26, most games played 340, most consecutive games played 224, most points with 2,002, most extra points made and attempted, 943 of 959. Most field goals made and attempted, 335 of 638. And most passes had intercepted 277. Blanda's Oakland teammate, rookie Neil Colsey, established a record for most yardage on punt returns with 655. Philadelphia quarterback Roman Gabriel, suffering through a poor season, set a record he would rather not have, 96 career fumbles. Minnesota veteran defensive end Jim Marshall can appreciate people such as Gabriel. He set a record for most fumbles recovered, 26, and his 220 games played are the most ever by a defensive player. Congrats to all of them on record set in 1975. Philadelphia. Chris fires Eagles general manager reacts bitterly to firing coach Mike McCormick. What do you think about the Eagles moving on from Mike McCormick?
It's a little interesting because, at times they played up and down to the competition. They almost beat Dallas. They almost beat St. Louis. But when they look bad, they look bad. And personally, I think when they got humiliated on that Monday night by the Rams, I think that was pretty much the sign that he was going to be gone no matter what, because you don't come back from games like that.
Larry Robinson, the NFL winners are picked as he's making his choices. Let's see what it says. The first game is Baltimore visiting Pitt, and this could be one we won't soon forget. But the Colts are young and Cinderella team, many of them. Let's see. I don't want to read the whole thing again, but not sure exactly what he's picking. I think he's picking Pittsburgh. Anyway, there's some news on Roger Staubach as well, as he says he will play on Tuesday. He's still suffering from a rib injury. He says he will play, and then of course that can take us to the other continuing down against the Redskins second quarter, but he played the rest of the game. Did we know about this injury during the game, or is this something that the Cowboys have hidden from us?
I guess it must have been hidden because when in the Jet game, remember, maybe it's one of the reasons they didn't have anything to play for against the Jets, but they gave him an extra week to recover. Hence, Clint Longley playing against the Jets.
Okay, it is now Wednesday, December 24th, 1975, Christmas Eve, and as Santa is making his rounds and using the technology of the time, we lose Swede Pittman, center and linebacker, played for the Pittsburgh Pirates of the NFL in 1975 at the age of 69, a native of Enos, Texas. No, sorry. He passed away in Enos, Texas. He was a native of Big Spring, Texas. So rest in peace, Swede Pittman of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Of course, that would become the Steelers organization. Also, we have the Cotton Bowl season as 12 Colorado Buffaloes will have incentive. Colorado wingback Billy Waddy has a special reason for being enthusiastic about the Buffaloes' Saturday date against Texas in the Astro Blue Bonnet Bowl. He's a Texas native, as are 12 other players from the Colorado Buffaloes heading into Houston
and
to
while
play.
the Blue Bonnet gets ready, and while the Blue Bonnet Bowl will start in a couple of days, there a major baseball event took place on December 23rd. I forgot to bring it up.
Go ahead.
Arbitrator Peter Sykes ruled in favor of Andy Messersmith and Dave McNally, thus effectively changing baseball's reserve clause and bringing about free agency to all players who play out their existing contracts.
Marvin Miller, mission accomplished.
How long until the NFL follows suit? The Bills led the league in total offense with 5,467, thanks mostly to O.J. Simpson, who led in rushing with 2,974 yards. I don't think he didn't have over 2,000 rushing yards. I think that's all-purpose yards. But the next time a Buffalo
Bills
Bill
did lead the league in points scored. They did lead the league in points scored, I should also note.
The next time that the Bills will lead the league in rushing will be 2025.
James Cook.
Let James Cook.
I'm surprised the Raiders are number one in. Kind of surprised the Raiders are number one in fewest yards allowed, considering we talk about the Steelers and the Rams.
The only thing posted on Christmas Day is a new cover photo that Chris put up from the Vikings, and appropriate on Christmas Day. It's a snow image of Chuck Foreman. So Merry Christmas, everybody! 1975. Moving on to Friday,
nice picture.
1976, we have NFL playoff preview. Can Franco and his super soldiers be stopped? And the Bengals' underbelly is a bullseye for Raiders bludgeons. Charles, what do you think about Franco Harris leading the Steelers in the playoffs?
That's the about Franco Harris said uncanny abilities 3 years ago.
As the Vikings. Last year, he is the reigning Super Bowl MVP. Asked Minnesota.
NFC heavyweight contenders primed to slug it out. Of course, that being the Vikings and Cowboys. Also, we got the Rams and Cardinals. And other bowl game previews here on this Friday. You can check out these newspaper articles on Facebook. Pigskin Glory Football 50 years ago today. NFL players and casinos. Here's an interesting story. Pro gritters are owed $5 million by Casino Head. What does that mean? Well, the San Diego Tribune reported Thursday that several professional football players invested hundreds of thousands of dollars with a Nevada casino operator and now under investigation for links to organized crime. This is not the kind of news the NFL needs. The Tribune also said Al Davis, managing partner of the Oakland Raiders, and Chuck Knox, coach of the Los Angeles Rams, have also had dealings with the operators, Alan R. Glick. The players invested in Glick's San Diego-based Saratoga. Sorry, I hit the wrong button. The Saratoga Corp to set up tax shelter. The corporation filed bankruptcy, and court records revealed that players who invested with Glick are owed over $5,000, including Green Bay quarterback John Hadle. Or, I'm sorry, $5 million. Green Bay quarterback John Hadle is owed $213,000 alone. Guys, what about this story coming out now? It's not gambling, but it's investing in gambling, and we know how the NFL feels about that.
Paul Horn. I mean, look at what happened with Hornigan and Harrison. Man, what timing! Just right before the playoffs start. Ouch.
Right now, especially after the Messerschmitt-McNally ruling yesterday.
Here's an opinion by Steve Weller. He says, Brand X Bowl pretender pick. The words of the song The Great Pretender, you'd get to read a neat parody, since the only thing I do know is that 8 National Football League teams are pretending they're going to the Super Bowl, and just 2 of them actually will. There will be no song and dance. All you'll get is the identity of the playoff survivors, who will look great in the preliminaries and then move on to Super Bowl 10, where the pressure will make them both play like Brand X, which isn't pronounced 10. Start off eliminating Baltimore. Of course, he then goes through and makes his picks. And let's see, Los Angeles pass. His picks for the week. He's picking the Steelers over the Colts. He says the Raiders are going to get past the Bengals, I think. He's picking Minnesota to beat Dallas and the Rams over the Cardinals. Your thoughts on his picks?
Basically, foregone conclusion. It looks like, it's like, if it's Minnesota Rams, and it would literally be the same Final Four of last year. So I guess we're not ready for change yet, because it would literally be the same Final Four as last year.
Pittsburgh versus Kansas in the Sun Bowl at El Paso. Pitt runs over Kansas 33-19. This is a matchup of the team that upset Oklahoma versus the team that upset Notre Dame. The former appeared to take the early lead, but an 82-yard touchdown off an option and pitch was called back due to illegal forward pass. That seemed to take all the wind off Kansas' sails, as the team that held Oklahoma's powerful running game to barely 200 yards completely and utterly collapsed against the run. Not 1, not 2, but 3 Pitt Panthers ran for 100 yards. It wasn't just Tony Dorsett, it was also Elliott Walker and Robert Haygood. Kansas ran for 342 yards themselves. One team made their runs count in regards to the scoreboard, and the other did not. Charles, what are your thoughts on Pitt having 3 100 yards rusher down in El Paso?
It was a flag by the Pittsburgh Panthers today.
How do you run for 342 yards and not score for 3 quarters? A real football mystery.
Moving on to the La Fiesta Bowl in Sun Devil Stadium in Arizona. Number 7 Arizona State beats the number 6 Nebraska Cornhuskers 17-14. Tempe was host to an intriguing game. One team had gone 3-0 in the Fiesta Bowls, while the other had won 6 straight bowl games, period. But Nebraska had blown a national championship shot versus Oklahoma and originally turned down an invitation to this game before having a change of heart. Conversely, Arizona State was hungry to not only prove their undefeated season was legitimate, but pull off a signature moment for their program. Even though Nebraska was a 14-point favorite, they were in for a battle through 3 quarters. Big Red led 14-6 as Arizona State could only muster 2 field goals. But in the 4th quarter, John Jefferson caught a touchdown. They went up for 2 to tie it up, went ahead with a field goal, then recovered a late fumble to complete this massive win. For Nebraska, it was basically like A&M. Start out 10-0, lose the regular season finale, lose the bowl game, and 3.5 months of great football gone away in 120 minutes. For Arizona State, it was a monumental win, and if Ohio State and Oklahoma were both to lose, maybe, just maybe, their impossible dream might come true. Charles, what are your thoughts on Arizona State's season? Charles?
What?
What are your thoughts on Arizona State's season?
That was a pretty good season for these Sun Devils to be one among the top 10. Of course, we don't want to go. They were expected to be in the top 10, or they had expectations to win a national championship. If I don't know, but Chris might know.
If they are undefeated, if Ohio State and Oklahoma both lose on New Year's Day, they could actually steal the national championship. They have a chance.
Nebraska rides the full Monty. Oops. Editor's pick. Chris picked this touchdown when Nebraska was trailing Arizona 3-0 in the second quarter of the Fiesta Bowl and facing a third down and goal when fullback Monty Anthony blasted through the Sun Devil defense for a 7-3 lead. Chris, since you picked this touchdown, what do you think of it?
Well, it's a classic Nebraska eye option full blast up the middle. But considering they were 14-point favorites, they didn't do enough of that.
There's actually, I used the second touchdown that was mentioned in the recap.
Talk a little more.
John Jefferson moves on up to a Fiesta Bowl in the Fiesta in the end zone. Trailing Nebraska 14-6 in the fourth quarter of the Fiesta Bowl, Arizona State's Fred Mortensen fakes an option and hits receiver John Jefferson for a quick slant from 10 yards out for the touchdown that with a three-pointer would tie the game up.
John Jefferson, just remember that name, along with Michael Haynes.
Yep, and John Jefferson obviously is going to be a name we're going to talk a lot about in the pros on the receiving ends. Here's another look as Fred Mortensen hits John Jefferson on the post pattern or a short slant.
Although actually John Jefferson will not join the pros for a few years. He won't join the Chargers until 78, so he's actually got 2 more years in college.
Interesting.
Yeah. That you know I've said before a few times in previous episodes that the collegiate athletes should play out their 4 years in college. That way they have a degree to fall back on if their pro football career does not pan out.
On a side note, from Jaguar Gator 9, which is one of the best YouTube channels out there, he actually talks about the Fiesta Bowl, the dumbest controversy in Fiesta Bowl history you can find on his page, as Nebraska damn near didn't play at Tempe to have. Chris, have you watched this video? Do you know what it's about?
I think it's basically, Nebraska had initially said, they weren't gonna, consider it as the alternative prize if they lost to Oklahoma. They were so focused on the national championship. Then they said they weren't going to do it, but then they decided they didn't want to look stupid, so they eventually had to change of heart.
Okay.
Yeah, you imagine Nebraska's ego was so big they wouldn't even play this game at Tempe. I think it would have been ripped by the media.
Moving on to Saturday and the divisional playoff games in the NFL, we start with the Baltimore Colts at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh plunders past Baltimore 28-10. This was billed as the team of destiny, Colts versus a Steelers team seemingly destined for glory. But this game instead was destined for a blooper reel with 8 turnovers, with most of them leading to scores. Pittsburgh was shockingly sloppy with 5 turnovers, 2 of them sitting up Colts points. The 10.5-point underdogs had led 10-7 after half, and it looked like Baltimore was on the verge of yet another shocker, an already stunning season. But a Colts turnover finally allowed Pittsburgh to grab a lead going into the fourth quarter. They scored again thanks to good field position on a short punt. The Colts got down to Pittsburgh's 3 before a fumble was returned 93 yards for a touchdown by Andy Russell, Pittsburgh's longest tenured player and one of the few holdovers from the pre-Chuck Noll era. Pittsburgh hardly looked like the world beaters they have been most of 1975, but they did what they had to do. For Baltimore, they have nothing to be ashamed of, going for 2-12 to 9 straight wins and dethroning the mighty Dolphins in the AFC East. Many thought that Don Shula would reign atop forever. Charles, sum up the Colts season in a few words now that it's over.
Nothing they hang their heads over. To go 2 wins last year to the playoffs after a 1-4 start, that's pretty impressive. And the quote comes on that it's 20 years in the future when the Rockets, despite being banged up, went on to repeat as NBA champion. He said, never underestimate the heart of a champion. That applies to these Pittsburgh Steelers, including that 94-yard touchdown return.
And as you can tell, don't be fooled by the video. This was a slow-moving score, as Vinny's about to detail.
Slowest scoop and score in NFL history. When the Colts were trying to come back in the 1975 AFC Divisional Playoff, Burt Jones was hit and fumbled, and Andy Russell scooped it up and ran it back 93 yards for the score in a 28-10 win. And what they mean by the slowest is Jack Ham, a fellow defender for the Steelers. He said that it was Russell was running so slow he couldn't tell if he was running for the end zone or running out the clock.
As I said at Andy Russell, he's their oldest player. He was pre Chuck Noll. When the closest the Steelers came to a championship pre Chuck Noll in 1963, Andy Russell was a rookie on that team.
Colorado versus Texas in the Bluebonnet Bowl at Houston. Number 9 Texas beats number 10 Colorado 38-21. The Astrodome was the site of a top 10 matchup between teams that finished third in their respective conferences. The Buffaloes roamed their way to an early 14-0 lead and 21-7 at halftime, but in the second half it was all Longhorns as they scored 31 unanswered points. The key play in that stampede were a blocked punt, touchdown, and a 55-yard field goal. The Longhorns may have been piped out of a cotton bowl on a technicality, but Darrell Royal in Texas showed upstart Colorado. There are levels to this. Chris, what are your thoughts on the Bluebonnet Bowl?
It's the power of momentum. You can play a great first half, but if something goes wrong, it can just go the other way. Think about it. A block punt touchdown. How often do teams that allow that to happen win?
And in the other divisional playoff game on this Saturday, the Cardinals versus the Rams, the NFC Divisional Playoff, Los Angeles Rams passed St. Louis 35-23. Things were lining up nicely for the Cardinals, playing in better weather than last December at Bloomington and facing an LA Ram team without their starting quarterback in James Harris. Instead, it was the worst-case scenario. Jim Hart had a pick six on St. Louis's first play from scrimmage and then proceeded to throw yet another one on the first play of the second quarter. Combined with already falling behind 7-0 and a fumble sandwiched around the interception returns, it was an abject nightmare. No James Harris, Ron Jaworski made no mistakes, including a 66-yard touchdown to Harold Jackson that basically killed any hopes of the Cardiac Cards comeback. All this on top of Lawrence McCutcheon's NFL single-game record of 202 playoff yards. For the Cardinals, you can't help but wonder if they got a home playoff game. Imagine going 11-3 and still having to go on the road because the NFC had a pair of 12-2 teams. For the Rams, this Jaworski guy more than met the challenge in a big spot. One could say he looked like a Polish rifle. Chris, your thoughts on the Cardinals playoff debacle?
Everything was lining up for them, but then, Jim Hart, first play, pick. First play, second quarter, pick. Interception around that. You give up 200 yards to one guy. And again, look at how it starts. It's
Jack
That's his first pass of the game.
Go ahead.
Again, when you literally get intercepted on the first play of the game, that's a bad omen, and so much for better weather, huh?
Jack Youngblood's first career touchdown when the Los Angeles Rams hosted the St. Louis Cardinals in the 1975 NFC Divisional Playoff. The Rams made the Cardinals wish they had missed the playoffs. Jack Youngblood picked off Cardinals passer Jim Hart and rumbled 47 yards for his first career touchdown to give the Rams a 14-0 lead. The Rams would get another pick six in the second quarter. So this was the second one. They had another one in the first. I had my touchdowns mixed up, but
well, either way, long story short, Jim Hart literally gave the Rams 2 touchdowns.
Okay, December 28th, 2025. It's a Sunday, and what we're about to read is one of the greatest games in NFL playoff history. It goes down, it's one of the games that's named, so let's get to it. In the NFC Divisional Playoff, Dallas shocks Minnesota 17-14. There are questions to be answered in this postseason matchup. Would Dallas's maligned running game continue its late season tear? Could the Doomsday defense slow down Tarkenton and Foreman? Dallas did allow a Foreman touchdown, albeit on a short field thanks to a fumble at the 4-yard line, but Fran wasn't able to deliver until he led a scoring drive to give Minnesota a late lead. They had a chance to salt it away, but a key 3rd down and 2 stop meant the Cowboys got one more chance with no timeouts and 85 yards to go, but Staubach had always been known as a savior of lost causes. On 4th and 6, he connected with Drew Pearson, who had caught 0 passes until the final drive. The other Preston, dropped a wide-open pass with 32 seconds left, but his fellow namesake more than made up for it on his stunning 50-yard touchdown catch with seconds left. Dallas's offense hadn't done much outside of their first drives on the 3rd and 4th quarters, but Staubach, as he had done in 1972 at San Francisco, proved for once again to be the savior of lost causes. For Minnesota, if they couldn't do it this year, when their 2 superstars were at the top of the game, when will the Vikings ever win the big one? This game, of course, is known as the Hail Mary.
Maybe give it
we are going to look at the Hail Mary itself, the original Hail Mary. Guys, as we're watching this play unfold, what are your thoughts on this as one of the greatest plays in NFL history?
You took Preston Pearson off the hook. Remember, literally just the play before, Preston Pearson dropped a wide open pass, and talk about bailing out, because that could have been a really terrible way to lose a game.
Well, what's play if we did playoff history? This Hail Mary or that immaculate reception 3 years ago?
I think I have to go with the immaculate reception because it was literally a fourth down in the final play of the game. This was not a fourth down play.
This one gets a lot of interesting press considering it is not what is considered a Hail Mary today, because there's only one receiver in the play. The reason it's called the Hail Mary is because that's what Roger Staubach referred to it in the post-game press conference, and it stuck, and then it developed, the Hail Mary play itself developed into what was the alley-oop before. This play here changed the name of an actual NFL play because of a press conference. But let's take a look at this play. This is the first time the term Hail Mary was used in football, and it's because of what Roger Staubach said after the game. Dallas trailing 14-10 in the fourth, and Drew Pearson hadn't had a catch until this drive. This doesn't look like a modern Hail Mary, but it is the Hail Mary. A 50-yard pass with 37 seconds left to Staubach hits Pearson for the game winner. There's also some controversy from Vikings fans who say Staubach pushed off. Pearson. When you hear Pearson's interview, he also talked about how the ball stuck. He wasn't even sure he'd caught it. It kind of just stuck between his arm and hip. Because if you look at the catch, when it resets itself again, or on the review, it's not a traditional two-hand catch.
Again, you mentioned how Pearson didn't know, and you mentioned how
as long as the ball does not touch the ground, if it's an A part of your body, whether it hits off your helmet, off your shoulder, anywhere on your body, and then you corral it, then it is considered a catch.
And ironically, just the play before, Preston Pearson literally dropped a ball wide open in the same circumstance. And Drew, again, he wasn't even sure he caught it until he did.
Yep.
By the way, not just the Preston Pearson, but don't forget, Minnesota, that 3rd and 2, Dallas had no timeouts. If they just converted that 3rd and 2, literally none of this would have ever happened.
This game overshadows the other 3 games on the weekend. Obviously, there's some fantastic touchdowns that occurred in the other 3 games, but this game goes down because, when a game gets named, whether it's the Immaculate Reception, the Hail Mary, games we'll see in the future like the drive, the fumble, the Music City Forward pass, those are games that are remembered in playoff lore, the greatest comeback, because of a play, a situation, something that happened that makes them stand out. Red Right 88. The Hail Mary is one of the games that made a lot of Cowboys fans become Cowboys fans. They might have tuned into the game, not sure who to root for. Maybe their teams weren't that good. But that drive alone and the way it ended got a lot of people to sit up and go, wow. Because remember, national television isn't a thing. You don't see a lot of teams until the playoffs. So if you're living in Bismarck, North Dakota, you might not have gotten a lot of games, but Dallas was able to market themselves. And then when they have a game like this, that's how they got a lot of fans that they have.
Remember, Vinny, Dallas had only played one. And remember, not only did Dallas have only one Monday night game in 75, this was the year they didn't play on Thanksgiving.
The Bengals versus the Raiders in the last divisional.
My father was a fan of the Cowboys long before the Hail Mary. I probably told you about Super Bowl 5 when neither team deserved to win that Super Bowl.
So the last game of the divisional playoff weekend, Oakland cages Cincinnati 31-28. The Bengals beat Oakland earlier this year, barely lost at the Coliseum last year, and felt good about their chances. The Raiders at times looked wobbly down the stretch. Both of these teams wanted another crack at Pittsburgh, but the Raiders came out like a team hell-bent on continuing what almost feels like a playoff tradition. They jumped out to leads of 10-0, 24-7, 31-14, and it was looking like business as usual once again in the AFC. But then a Bengals interception set up a touchdown. They forced their first punt all game, got a rare shank from Ray Guy, scored again with a short field, and suddenly it was 31-28. On a day that saw one incredible ending, were we about to have another, especially with a last-minute Raiders punt? It wasn't to be, as Cincinnati got a penalty for running into the kicker and basically salted the game. A bitter end to his storied coaching career of Paul Brown. In a year where AFC upstarts like Baltimore and Houston made headlines, in the end, we wind up back at the same time as same time last year. Raiders versus Steelers in a second straight AFC title and their fourth straight playoff matchup overall. To some, this is an epic continuation of football's fiercest rivalry. To others, it's as a stale rerun in an NFL seemingly dominated by the same handful of teams with no upstarts. Regardless of what side you take, it will decide who gets a ticket to Super Bowl 10. Chris, you're one of the proponents of not wanting to see the same thing year after year. What would you be going through if you were alive in 75?
Well, Miami missing the playoffs is a nice start, but it's like Oakland, Pittsburgh again. And keep in mind, let's go back to Dallas. If Drew Pearson does not catch that Hail Mary, it literally would have been the same Final Four teams as last year. And I know it's a great rivalry, but you can't just depend on the same matchup. Like, I know Pittsburgh and Oakland's a great rivalry, but if you're a fan in Buffalo, in Denver, in Baltimore, in Miami, in New England, in Cleveland, you kind of want to see something different after a while.
That just
Moving on here, on Monday, December 29th, it's a sad weekend for Fran Tarkenton because not only did he lose to the Dallas Cowboys, his father, the Reverend Dr. Dallas Tarkenton, passed away over the weekend. The elder Tarkenton was age 63 and was watching Minnesota's loss to Dallas in the first round of the pro playoffs with his other two sons when he was stricken and was dead on arrival. So sad weekend for Fran Tarkenton. Ironic too, that his name is Dallas.
history on people weren't even targeted on the same day.
In the history of the Vikings documentary, Fran Tarkenton said that losing to the Cowboys was only the second word, because he even talked about how losing to Dallas wasn't as bad. I mean, even again, it's one thing to lose a football game, and as the three of us know all too well, it's another thing to lose a parent.
Yes.
Well, with that sad note, football does continue when we move on to the Gator Bowl in Jacksonville, Florida. Number 17 Maryland blanks number 13 Florida, 13-0. The Gators are going for their first 10-win season in program history, but they couldn't even get to 10 points as the Terps picked off a pair of passes to lead to their only touchdown of the game as well as a field goal. Their defense had 4 takeaways overall and were so thoroughly impressive you would have thought Randy White was still a Terrapin. For the Gators, it was the second straight year they wilted in a big late December bowl game. Sugar last year, Gator this time. Chris, any thoughts on Florida's Gator Bowl performance? Remember, the Gator Bowl is named after them.
Maybe they're just not ready for the big time. Even when they got to the Orange Bowl under Spurrier, they lost to Missouri, and they're trying to break through in a college world dominated by the usual teams. But Arizona State was able to do it, but not everyone can be the Sun Devils.
Here is
and don't figure the Gator Bowl, they have the Florida school gets bitten by the Gator.
Here's a look at the cover photo that was changed on December 29th to feature from the Raiders and Bengals playoff game.
It's a tight spiral by the great Kenny Anderson.
We got prep work on New Year's Eve. Nothing to talk about on December 30th. So we move right into New Year's Eve, and we're going to just take a look at Georgia's in high cotton as tight disciplined reshapes the Bulldogs, and confident Arkansas says it will whip the Bulldogs as we prepare for the Cotton Bowl there, and then Alabama and Penn State in the My Gosh Bowl down in New Orleans.
When we get to the Sugar Bowl, there's actually an interesting little backstory about that selection.
More bowl preview and the NFL Roselle rule. Baptist Connection is Oklahoma's host in the Orange Bowl. Archie Griffin's goal is a national title in the Rose Bowl. Weather will be affecting the Peach Bowl in Atlanta, and the Roselle rule lives, but only for court appeal. Let's take a look at that real quick. It's a little blurry as you rule in. A ruling that the National Football League's Roselle rule violates antitrust laws appeared headed for higher courts Wednesday as the debate raged over whether the decisions will wreck professional sports. Judge Earl Larson of the U.S. District Court ruled Tuesday that the there we go.
Elimination of the rule holding a fantasy team to play one team when not holding animals competitive balance of quality. Antitrust?
Yep, President Max Winter of Minnesota said he was positive there will be an appeal as soon as our lawyers have studied it. So not only do you have the gambling thing going on with the players out of a casino in Las Vegas, not the players, but um, you also have this now as the NFL headed toward their 10th Super Bowl, dealing with off the field news of not the greatest quality. Let's move on to the Peach Bowl in Atlanta as the Mountaineers tame the Wolfpack 13-10. That's the West Virginia Mountaineers. North Carolina State went up 10-0 at one point, but it could have been 14 as they had to settle for a field goal late in the first half. West Virginia took advantage and got a touchdown just before halftime, albeit they missed the extra point. But the Wolfpack did absolutely nothing on offense in the second half. Late in the game, West Virginia got a serendipitous break as a pass juggled by two defenders landed into the arms of a Mountaineer for a go-ahead score. North Carolina State drove into West Virginia territory, but a sack and penalty sealed their fate. The coaches in the game, Lou Holtz and Bobby Bowden. Charles, do you think we'll ever hear about them two coaches? Charles, what are your thoughts on Lou Holtz and Bobby Bowden coaching in this?
Lou Holtz?
Lou Holtz of
I'm not
North
sure
Carolina
about
State.
Bobby Bowden, but I know. But I can tell you now that Lou Holtz is going to make a jump to the NFL, trying it out with Joe Namath and the Jets.
And as for Bobby Bowden, Vinny, I'll just say this will be Bobby Bowden's last game coaching West Virginia. He will take the Florida State job. Wonder how long that'll last.
Yeah. Another Cotton Bowl preview. Attitude changed the difference. Arkansas fans take up the slack, and let's see. Color of the Razorbacks, Hal McAfee, razor sharp as we get ready for the Cotton Bowl.
I should also mention that both of these teams won key games. Remember that Georgia-Florida game in November? That ended up being the difference between the Cotton Bowl and the Gator Bowl. And of course, A&M beat Arkansas early, and of course, Arkansas beat A&M earlier this month.
So the Dunkel Index rates the Steelers as the best team left out of the four. They are favored to beat Oakland by 7. The Rams are favored to beat the Cowboys by 6 in the NFC Championship. We mentioned that Charlie Johnson retired. Well, the Broncos have signed free agent running back Reggie Cherry of DeLand High and the University of Houston. And as far as college goes, Oregon State named assistant coach Nate Shaw, defensive backs coach Larry Bryan, defensive line, Ed Sowash, offensive line, and Rob Adolph, quarterbacks. Clemson has named Charlie Pell assistant coach and defensive coordinator at Virginia Tech for the past 2 seasons to a similar position. USC has named John Jackson offensive backfield coach at Illinois for the past 5 seasons to a similar position under new head coach John Robinson, and the Salukis of Southern Illinois have named Ray Dempsey specialist coach for the Detroit Lions as their head coach.
Wow, it's the opposite. We talk about college to pro. We got to go going from pro to college.
Yeah.
The NFL blackout rule still in the news, as the NFL games will supersede the blackout rule. A law that prevented blackouts of local telecasts of sold-out professional football games expires at midnight tonight, but will have no effect on the National Football League games Sunday or at the Super Bowl. NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle assured congressional committees there would be no blackouts of the postseason games if all the tickets are sold.
Oh, remember, the Immaculate Reception was locally blacked out in Pittsburgh.
What?
O.J. Simpson.
Different era, Charles.
O.J. Simpson has been named UPI's Player of the Year. Thoughts on that?
I know Tarkenton, but again, I think it makes sense because OJ was brilliant, and it wasn't his fault that their defense couldn't hold leads, and he did his part. Remember, in that Miami game and those Baltimore games, he was doing his part. He even had 100 receiving yards in one of the Miami games. He did his part.
And as we said before, the Rozelle rule has been deemed an antitrust by the courts. That's just another version of it. We move on to the Sugar Bowl, Penn State versus Alabama. Chris, do you want to do your backstory first?
In the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans, number 4 Bama tames the number 8 Nittany Lions. So the first installment of this classic bowl game indoors had an interesting lay. So Bear Bryant was miffed that the Orange Bowl chose Michigan to face Oklahoma, even though the Wolverines had a lower ranking. Bear Bryant wanted to play Penn State instead of Nebraska, a one-loss team who was not only ranked higher, but had played in this bowl game the previous year. So Alabama was miffed they didn't get to play Oklahoma, but he chose Penn State instead of Nebraska, who had a better ranking.
As it
The
was,
Superdome didn't exactly get a, as it was, the Superdome didn't exactly get a barn burner. Then you can take it from here.
as it was much ado about nothing offensively, 3-3 late in the third, until Bama got the game's only touchdown to snap a 9-year bowl losing streak. The lack of offense was surprising, but a bigger surprise was Alabama generating 210 passing yards while Penn State actually ran for more yards. One has to think that if these teams ever meet up in a New Orleans rematch, it might be an upgrade if they are playing for higher stakes. So, Chris, what are your thoughts on that as we look at the only touchdown in the game?
It's kind of funny. Alabama lost only once, but again, the Missouri laws kind of took them out of it. They wanted to play Oklahoma. I remember they had played in the Orange Bowl last year, but the Big Ten rule kind of took it out, and Alabama was at that. Wait a minute, you're taking the team that's lower ranked than us, then we'll play a team that's lower ranked. Again, Nebraska played in the Sugar Bowl last year, but there Brian Pursley wanted to play Penn State, and maybe that also played a role in Nebraska's little Fiesta Bowl situation.
This date in touchdown history posted this touchdown. Alabama takes stock of their only 75 Sugar Bowl touchdown. In a hard-fought Sugar Bowl, Alabama and Penn State struggled to score, but in the third quarter, one play after a near-disastrous fumble, Mike Stock took the option pitch from Richard Todd and scampered 14 yards for the for the game's only six-pointer.
Also, Richard Todd and Ozzie Newsom's last games, and also it is Richard Todd's last game in college. Wonder how he'll fare in the pros.
Steeler
Not
fans
exactly.
anxious. More than 1,000 fans lined up Tuesday to purchase tickets for the AFC Championship game. Steelers spokesman said the tickets selling at $15.25 each were sold within a short time. Some of the fans stood in line all night so they could make the purchase.
15.25. Remember, 1975. That's a lot of money.
Albert Dilly Daly passed away on December 31st. He played guard for the Hartford Blues in 1926. He was a retired storekeeper. Albert J. Burt Daly, as he was known in his personal life, was age 72 of Market Street Bangor, a retired store owner, died Wednesday in Monroe County Hospital in East Stroudsburg. So we end the year with another passed away. This one we don't have the exact date for. He just died in December. Jim Nicely, tackle of the Staten Island Stapletons in 1930, and I couldn't find an obituary, and the actual date is not also listed on the.
I don't know. They don't know.
Yeah. So while we're taking a look at the ball coming down, let me real quick talk about how 1976 is going to work. As you know, we're recording this in January of 1976. We're already, after tonight, ready to do the next episode. It will be a couple days before we get to it, but we will get to it. Well, how is 1976 going to go? It is the bicentennial, so we're going to incorporate that into football. We'll, of course, as always, mention what's going on in baseball and a few other sports, but football will be our main topic. The off season, there's not as much news as there is when it comes to the 2025-26 off season. So what we're going to do is through January, we'll still do 3 episodes, as we'll have the conference championships, the Super Bowl, and the Pro Bowl. And then February through July, there will only be 1 episode per month, and it'll be obviously the February episode will be in March. The March episode will be recorded at the beginning of April, et cetera, until we get to August in the preseason, and then we'll go back to 3 episodes a month for Pigskin Glory. A couple other things, side notes.
And by the way, Vinny, I believe you'll tell me like certain things, like for example, what if I want to do the schedule release or the Monday or the NFL draft? Like you'll let me know when certain things are going on in each of those months.
As if I can find them, I'll definitely let you know. The other thing, I do plan on doing a couple of reaction videos where hopefully all 4 of us, but if not, 2 or 3, how many we'll watch a couple games, big games from 75 in the off season. 2 that I definitely will get to are the Hail Mary and Super Bowl 10. We're definitely going to watch those. If you subscribe to Patreon, you can watch us reacting to Game 6 of the World Series and the Monday night game between the Cowboys and Chiefs. We may do 5. Not sure how many we're going to do in the off season, how much time I'll have, as I also have other things that I'm doing, plus we work full-time jobs and et cetera, but you can look forward
And
to
don't
those
forget, Vinny,
things.
your new podcast. Don't forget, Vinny, your other podcast that just went up to episode 2 today.
Episode 2 of Take Dick Tales went up today. So, but that is a look at what's coming in the off season. And again, Charles is going to tell us baseball news and notes. Before we sign off, Charles, you mentioned the big news about baseball in December. Anything else in December happen, or is that all you got?
That's the other baseball front. But what a major development.
Yes, huge development. We may touch on basketball and hockey as well. But again, this podcast is mainly about football. So thanks for joining us, episode 9. It's been a great season. 75 has a lot of memories to look at, and 76 is going to be even better and brighter. For Chris and Charles, I'm Vinny Vincent, and we will see you in 1976.